And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, Tickety Boo, everything's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo!
Welcome to Tickety Boo. Today we're diving into a topic that's easier said than done. Acceptance and letting go. Whether it's holding on to past mistakes, people who've hurt us, or even expectations that didn't pan out, letting go can feel impossible. But here's the thing, holding on only weighs us down. In this episode we'll explore what acceptance really means, why it's so freeing, and how to take those first steps towards letting go without guilt. So grab a cuppa, settle in, and let's figure out how to lighten the load together. So welcome back into the Tickety Boo studio. I'm with Ian and Iona, and today we were going to talk about finding acceptance and letting go. And what I mean by that is whether something's come to an end, whether it's a relationship, a job, a friendship. Why is it that us human beings have such a hard time letting go of things? Why do we stay stuck? So Ian, why is it that you feel that we struggle to let things go, even sometimes when we know these things were not good for us? Actually, better things are to come from it, but we stay stuck in this phase.
Well, I think a lot of the time it depends on how we let go, whether it was our decision, it was something that we came to terms with before we decided, or whether it wasn't our decision and it was something that happened that maybe took us by surprise. So a lot of the time we struggle to let go. Sometimes you don't understand it, you feel there's a sense of injustice. Sometimes you need the validation of other people giving you sort of their opinion, well, agreeing with your point of view. That is something I've personally seen when relationships have been parted with family members because you feel an injustice has happened to you. So you expect other people to take your point of view, and then when that doesn't happen, sometimes you struggle with that. That sort of prolongs how long it takes to adjust, because you just don't feel as if everybody else is getting the situation and seeing it from where you are.
I think it doesn't help that our brains love to cling on to the negative, don't they? Our brains are like Teflon when it comes to positive. That just slips off us, but our brains are like Velcro for negativity. It just sticks to us, and our brains are actually hardwired as part of our survival strategy to hang on to negativity, to look out for the fear, to make sure that we don't get, that we don't head into danger and something bad happens to us. But it's this, I suppose it's getting to this stage of realising whatever it is that's come to an end, letting go is a process. It's not a thing like a light switch that you just flick it and it happens.
Yeah, it's that expectation that we think that this relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a work environment, because that's a relationship, when anything comes to an end where we expected it would turn out better. We thought, I certainly thought my marriage was going to be forever. When we have these expectations and then suddenly, oh wait, that's not happening. So it's like literally the rug's being pulled out from under us. And it takes a period of adjustment, and there's definitely different ways I've handled this over the course of my decades, where sometimes it wasn't very healthy, but definitely I can honestly now say that every relationship that's ended, whether it was friendship, romantic, work, anything that's ended now, I can see growth, I can see opportunity, and there's always been a lesson that I've learned. And even with my marriage, which I thought would be forever, that took a really long time of letting go and dealing with that. And we separated in a way that is called conscious uncoupling. We weren't trying to do that. That's just the way we did it. But talking into other people's expectations, as you say, Ian, we had other people telling us each separately how we should be behaving and how the other one was basically going to screw each other over. And it was through us coming to each other and going, oh, actually, I've been said this. And he was being told other things. And we were like, oh, wait, that's them. That's not our story. So we chose how we were going to do it. So even though we were doing it consciously, I mean, in some ways it was almost harder to let go, and it took me years, and then I've learned so much from that. But I think it's those unmet expectations where I thought that would be forever, or the career, and for a lot of people, the job or the career or the thing they thought would be forever, or where they thought they'd be by now.
Yeah, I think part of the letting go and the process of letting go, that doesn't mean that you have to be happy with what's happened or agree with what's happened, but you have to get to that point of going, is me hanging on to this more detrimental to me than beginning to let it go? And I know in the past in my life where I struggled to let something go, the suffering has come from the stories I've been telling myself off the back of letting go. If I let this go, it means I'll be on my own forever, or there's something wrong with me, or I'll never find this again, or whatever it may be. So it's actually that a lot of the suffering is internalized through the narrative that runs through our mind. And that, it takes a lot of people a long time to figure that out. You've got, you've kind of got to get across, you've got to control what you can. And you can control whether you listen to the story that you tell yourself.
And it's accepting the fact that not everybody else has to listen to your story and your narrative. It's your reality. Nobody else is living that.
Yeah.
And letting go, as you say, it's just letting go of those things you can't manage. If it no longer serves you, take your lessons, accept the fact that you can't change it. And once you give it acceptance, whether that acceptance is a form of forgiveness or just letting go, or detachment. That's what you need to do.
I think acceptance is probably easier to do if you've controlled the narrative in the run-up to the change. And what I mean by that is let's take it away from relationships for a bit, and let's say it's about a job or a career, your vocation, where you've been made redundant. And the organisation have known for a period of time that they're going to be letting you go, but to you it's come as a big shock. When something comes to an end, like a friendship where there's maybe been a fallout, or there's been a period of time of disagreement, and one person decides to walk away, that person's probably spent a reasonable amount of time maybe planning or contemplating that, where it's come to you as a sudden shock. So I do think there are circumstances where letting go is more difficult because you're still stuck in the shock of it, if that makes sense. And that's where I think some people get a little bit starstruck, like, I can't believe, rabbit in the headlights. I actually don't know what to do here, in sort of the freeze response. But I keep bringing the conversation back to this. The art of letting go is actually realising it is a process, and the process takes time, and searching for the lessons. You talked about in everything that happens to us, although in the heat of the moment you can't see it, there's a lesson. But normally the anxiety and the overwhelm and all the high emotion that you're feeling, you can't figure that out when you're in that state.
Oh gosh, no. And also, like, the last thing you want is somebody saying, "Hey, look for the lesson, man. It's all cool and groovy." Heck no. Like, that's it. Like, it's in hindsight, like, we get to learn these as we go, and as we get older and we've had many of these lessons, we go, I know at some point there might be a lesson, but right now, like, F you. And it is a process. And when it's something that's completely outside our control, where it's a sudden shock, like losing a job, let's say, because a lot of people can identify with that job, particularly if they love that job. Let's say, I am, for some reason, a fireman. I don't know why that springs to mind, but I am a fireman. It makes a difference to the community. It's important. And then you lose your job for completely unexpectedly. That's that loss of identity, of who you are in the world,
or who you thought you were,
who you thought you were, and you've got no control. And I think again, it comes back to what we always revert to practically is we need a bumper sticker: work on yourself. Like it's the inner work, because that's where you get to be your own, your own cheerleader and be there for yourself. And it's building these resilience and all that. We've said this again and again. And yes, we know it's difficult. Yes, we're not saying it's going to be okay overnight, particularly when it's something that comes as a complete shock like that.
So are we kind of saying that this process of letting go afterwards is not been hyper focused on the process of letting go. It's actually focusing on the process of living and being a human being and doing.
Yeah, maybe figuring out who you are without that relationship, or your future plans have just been thrown into turmoil.
Yeah.
And how difficult is it to find new plans when you're stuck in this turmoil and you can't come to terms? You know, you can't replace that future thinking that you thought you had all figured out with a plan until you've healed. You've found time to figure out what you want to do again. And
so the process of letting go, we're kind of saying, happens when you get into the art of living.
Yeah. And definitely it's that, what have I got? So again, we can come back to gratitude and part of acceptance. Well, what am I grateful for right now? Okay, I'm not grateful for possibly in that initial moment of losing the job, but what do I have? What are the relationships? What have I accomplished? And as you say, start to look at, well, what are you really interested in? What other interests do you have? And so to start to think of this as a pivotal moment. We've had a whole show a couple of weeks ago where we talked about those pivotal moments. You know, it's a time to pivot that's been thrust upon you. It's not a chosen time to reevaluate, but we all reevaluated when COVID first happened. So again, I mean, talk about the unexpected globally.
Do you feel that, when you feel like you're at that point of struggling to let go, you feel like you've kind of hit rock bottom, like there's nowhere to go, you are at your lowest point and you're really struggling to come to terms with whatever it is that's come to an end? Because I always feel that when you hit rock bottom, that's where you learn the most about yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that rebuilding process.
Yeah, it's the classic saying, isn't it? Well, when you've hit rock bottom, there's only one way you can go, and that's up. But, when you're in the shock of whatever it is that has naturally concluded, that can be difficult to do, can't it?
Definitely.
Really difficult. Can you think of times in your life where you've struggled with it? Where something's happened, where it could be a business transaction, an interpersonal relationship, a job that you've had, a place that you've been, and through no decision of yours, something outside has happened and you've had to come to terms with it. Can you recall times where that's happened and you've had to deal with it?
Definitely, it's narrowing it down to one that would be the problem.
Right.
Well, just to steer away from relationships, a classic one was not getting paid. A lot of money that wound up sort of ending one of my previous businesses. It was a huge amount of money, and I just couldn't get past. Well, firstly, I couldn't get past telling my staff that the jobs were gone. And again, it was the feeling.
And then that's a whole other level of acceptance and letting go, because you're also feeling responsible for your
guilt.
employees. That's a whole other level.
Yeah, so that there was guilt, there was a sense of failure, there was suddenly everything I'd worked for, everything I thought I'd worked for had just changed. And the voice in my head was telling me that everything was going to fall to pieces, everything was going to stop, my wife was going to go, I'd lose the house. But the reality was everything that mattered was still there, and I never had to start again because I had a skill set, I had contacts, I had resilience. I'd just learnt the biggest lesson in the world. And the liquidator, in the end, I think I got something ridiculous like 2 pence in the pound or something like that. So out of all this money I was owed, I had a cheque for I think it was £127 that I then couldn't cash, that stayed on my notice board at work to remind me of the lesson that I'd learned. So I turned it round as a lesson, and I had to accept it. I accepted. And part of that acceptance to me was realising that I wasn't starting from scratch. Everybody still had my back.
Yeah.
And a lot of, though it wasn't ideal, a lot of my non-acceptance was catastrophising. So it was at that point I learnt to, when I do hit a low place or I learned to just turn off my emotions and stop acting on emotions and start working on fact, which is probably the biggest lesson that I drew from that.
I think that's a really key point that you just raised. Catastrophisation was actually getting in the way of letting go, because you're so wrapped up in the what if And remember I said earlier about the story that you're trapped inside your head and becoming aware of the stories. I mean, I think we have to accept that whatever's come to an end or whatever's concluded, there is going to be this period where you struggle with it, while you try to make sense of it. And most of that is when you come out of that high emotion. You need to let the dust settle a little bit. You're going to catastrophize when you're in high emotion. It's just what we do, isn't it? So are we kind of saying at that point where, it's raw, you're in the heat of it, that's not the point to focus on letting go. It's actually at that point about calming yourself down and just knowing that this moment, the intensity of the moment, will pass.
Yeah.
That's right, because otherwise you close yourself off to the new opportunities. They're gonna help propel you back.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing. I was just thinking, when you I was fascinated by the story you were telling us about how that played out. I'm almost guessing now that there's probably a positive that's come out the back of that.
Absolutely. Every business I've ever run has been run completely differently.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to let that happen again.
How many times, collectively between us, have you had something happen where you think, this is absolutely terrible, this is the end, what's the point now? Within months or maybe a year or so later go, I am actually so glad that happened.
I would say I believe we'd learn to deal with these setbacks, whatever they are and however big they are. And the more we get to go through them, the easier it is. And this is how we build up resilience. I mean, my parents divorced in the 70s. We're going back a long time now. And we were the first family to get divorced in the rural area in Wales that I grew up in. And that was like completely out of my control. There were so many things that happened as a child and a teenager and into my 20s that were so out of my control. And then I think that gave me the coping skills for later in life when more adult things were happening that were out of control, whether it was, my marriage ending, loss of a job, like whatever it is, because it's like, okay, it didn't kill me last time, like this too will pass, but that's a learned skill. And if somebody's not, it's almost like the more setbacks and challenges you have that you have overcome and risen from, the easier it is. And that's where we build resilience, and that's where positive psychology talks into, whereas those who haven't find it harder. So I think it's remembering that this too shall pass, and it didn't kill me last time, it's probably not going to kill me this time, and just get through it and being present, and the next best step is the first step.
I know where there's been points in my life where I've struggled to start this process of releasing. The hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, you can look back now and go, actually the lesson from it was there was many opportunities before it came to this huge crescendo that you had an opportunity to do something about it. And some of the worst things have turned out to be the best things. And one of the things I say to the clients in the therapy room is, look, problems delayed are problems doubled. So sometimes when something suddenly comes to an end, it may feel like it suddenly came to an end, but there's been lots of red flags and warnings prior, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we don't want to deal with them because we fear that we're going to be pushed into that place where we have to learn acceptance and let go. So maybe it's this fear, not fear, but this sense of control and hanging on. We hang on so tight that actually that's what creates the pain. And it's that art of letting go.
Yeah, and I grew up with a philosophy too, with being raised within a Buddhist environment. It's about the art of non-attachment. So that was something that I didn't realise how much, actually just now in listening to you say that, how much that's played a part of my life, is because the only thing that's definite is that nothing's permanent. And so, yes, it's easier, as a child I didn't understand that, but just knowing that nothing is permanent, nothing lasts forever in the capacity it is. Even a relationship that hasn't ended, it evolves. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not about detaching from a cold and detached place, which can which is mentally unhealthy, but it's the art of disattachment where my life, my happiness, my sense of fulfillment, my sense of prosperity, abundance and success isn't reliant on this one thing. Success is about the connections, the friendships, the business, your sense of self-worth, the impact you have on the world. And I know the three of us wouldn't be sat here if we hadn't been through trials and tribulations, and we have all risen and grown from that. We wouldn't be able to have the amazing conversations that we get to have, to talk with our clients in the therapy room, with the depth of knowledge we've had because of the shit show that we've all been through at some point in our lives.
So, would you agree that in some part, something that can definitely help this process of letting go is gratitude?
Yes.
So, whether it's a friendship that's come to an end or a relationship or a job, actually being grateful for the experiences, because there would have been positive experiences in there, you know, and you would have learnt things, they would have taught you things, you would have had experiences. Being grateful that you had the opportunity to do the things and experiences that you had. So gratitude, is that going to help that process, do you think?
Yes, it is. And it's not about trying to sit there with gritted teeth and come up with, I'm grateful for, like, it's actually when you can be in that place and start to look for the little things you can be grateful for. Maybe in this moment where you're still in it, you can be, oh, well, remember some of the good times, or remember something that went well, if it's a job that went well at work, and maybe they sent you on a training, because we build that up. And gratitude, we only need to do 3 gratitudes a day to build this sense of abundance within us. Like, there's the scientific facts, and it's all out there. So it's not a matter of listing 1,000 things we're grateful for and not really believing them, but trying, like, just each day, like, part of doing this, find something that you're grateful for about that, either in your immediate day or about that relationship or the circumstance that you're needing to let go. What was because you will start to see the positives, and our mind, as we've already said before, looks to prove us right. So if we talk about how much it's awful and how terrible this is, and this always happens to us, our mind is going to, yes, look, you just got cut off in traffic. Look what just happened to you. Somebody took the last tin of biscuits off the shelf at Christmas time, whatever it is. But we go, oh my gosh, look, you can choose how you're going to show up. And then the more you look for gratitude, the more you will find things to be grateful for. And that is the biggest part, I believe, in letting go, in building our resilience, in having that acceptance and the art of non-attachment to what's happened to us. Because when we practice the art of non-attachment, then we take it away from an external thing, and we just come back to ourselves, because all we can work on is ourselves.
Well, I think personally, out of all of that, my biggest takeaway from any fresh start or letting go has always been perspective, because my perspective has changed every time. So these things that I used to see as being the biggest problem in the world, I've now seen it 50 times. It's not something that even gets a second thought. And when you think the world's going to stop, and you know what? It didn't stop turning. Life just carried on. So your perspective changes, and then your picture of the world gets bigger, because you stop seeing these minor. Well, there's not always minor bumps, but you stop seeing these situations as total showstoppers.
So the example you gave us, where the person didn't pay you, and you know you're feeling all of this fear because you had people to pay, and you feel like you're letting people down, and all of that. The lesson that you learnt during that process, how many times subsequently do you feel that's helped you?
Every single day. My perspective changed hugely. Every time something went wrong, I'm going to go bump. Oh, I'm going to lose the car. Oh, my wife's going to leave. Oh, I'm going to lose the house. And that catastrophising. Now, I see that same stuff, and it's just something else I've seen every day. So on a perspective scale, it's so low. And now the problems that I can deal with now, once upon a time, would have sent me over the edge like that. But now I can deal with things on a far grander scale just because I've seen them before. I've learnt how to deal with them. The power has been taken out of them because I've lived through them and I've survived.
And do you feel, I mean, you don't want to make this episode about relationships, but I think, you can look at a relationship, but we could broaden this out. When you feel like you've been dumped, whether that's dumped in a relationship or dumped out of a job or dumped out of a friendship, or life has just dumped you, the art of being able to look at it and go, well, whatever that thing was or isn't for me. It wasn't right for me because it wouldn't have left me. It wouldn't have dumped me in the way that it dumped me, if that kind of makes sense to you.
So there'll be something out there or someone out there that's just more suitable for you.
You should be somewhere else doing something else with somebody else.
And things are right for you at one point, but as we all change, they're not right for you at another phase of your life.
Yeah.
You know, that could be a job. I mean, how many people out there were focused on a job that they never got, and then later on they get that opportunity but realise they don't actually want that job because the other possibilities that they've got and the other avenues that they found while they were waiting are far better.
Yeah, and I think with this too, it's we evolve, we change, and none of us should be in a situation where we're not appreciated, whether it's in a relationship or a job, career, whatever it is. We all deserve to be valued in our relationships and respected in whatever capacity it is. And I think, so trying to hold on to something that's no longer good for us, no longer makes us feel good about ourselves. You know, as the song goes, let it go.
It can be hard though sometimes, can't it? Because sometimes you have to let go of stuff you love.
Yeah.
So that could be letting go of a relationship or a friendship where you may love the person and you may love the job, but you know it's no good for you anymore.
That's my definition of toxic. You've got a connection on some level. Sometimes it's deep level, sometimes not so much. But then when that general sense of emotion is unstable, 1 minute you're feeling good, the next minute it's not calm, it's not sort of feeding you inner peace. Yeah, it's constantly leaving you with some kind of inner turmoil or conflict.
Yeah.
And then at that point, as much as you love somebody, it's
Is it
good
worth
to let
it?
go. Yeah.
That can be difficult though if it's a family member, can't it? You know, whether it's a parent or a sibling that you've got to walk away from for your own peace. It's very easy for us to say, just let go. It's a process, just do it. But that is almost like cutting a limb off, isn't it?
It is, because you feel that you feel obligated to be with that person. You feel that you should love them. You feel it's your duty bound to love or like that person. But sometimes that's not the case. Some of the most poisonous people that you'll ever meet can be family members.
Yeah.
And that is one of the hardest breakups that you can have, because that is when everybody has their opinion.
Right.
You know, people want to take sides. That's when because you care for all the other people around you, because they're also family. That's when you feel that they need to take your viewpoint on board, and you need to take the validation.
So how do we get to this place where we realise we need to let go?
I learned from a friend of mine. I think it was probably in the 90s. That was when I was like, she didn't talk to her brother, and I was like, oh, like we don't have to stick with the family we're born with. And I have had times where I have honestly just completely cut my father out of my life because it was toxic. It didn't make me feel any better. And how I felt when I would be around him was just not nice. And my brothers had very different relationships with him. I chose to not be there and while we're recording this, he's living in a nursing home. And I do have compassion for him, and I've talked him into it before. I've done a lot around forgiveness for our relationship. But yeah, I've had long periods of time where I didn't have him in my life, and it wasn't done out of spite, but it was about my own mental well-being and what it did to me to be in that toxic dynamic.
But when you walk away from something that you know is not good for you, but you feel attached to it because maybe it's familiar, the brain doesn't like change. Even when the thing that we're familiar with brings us pain, it's going to fiercely resist you making that change. How quickly do you feel the shift comes once you've made that decision? Like you said, you decided at certain points in your life to cut off your relationship with your dad for your own well-being. Did you feel instant relief, or was there a bit of a tail off?
I would say it would depend. The times when I did it, where it was like, when I wasn't being reactive, which I did in my younger years, but it was like, it would bring me such a deep sense of relief, but also I wasn't like, I had no shame, I had no guilt. My brothers never ever gave me a hard time about not being involved. And so I was very fortunate. So I didn't have family members. I had other people judging me for not being, it's like, oh, you know, what an awful daughter you are. But quite frankly, I didn't care because I felt I was so comfortable with my decision. So I think people have to be really clear about why they're making that decision. So then, because if we're triggered by other people, their expectations on us, that means we're still processing it. Like, we're not comfortable with the decision we made. I was so comfortable with my decision, it didn't bother me what other people thought.
For me personally, every time I've had to make that decision, it's felt like an instant release. Once I've made it, it's the build up to making the decision that has always been more difficult than when I actually make the decision to break contact, and then that relief is there, and then I can move on fairly quickly personally. Because I've found that when you've got somebody living in your head, you might not physically be with them, you might not physically see them, but all the while that you're thinking about them, you're thinking about, says they think, what they might be doing, what they might be saying about you behind your back, how you could have changed things. It's all stopping you from moving forwards. Yeah. And it's that inner conflict and turmoil, and it's that inner sort of anxiety. And until you actually switch that off, you can't find that inner peace and let the universe show you the way forward.
But there'll be people listening to this going, you know, if you're in a toxic relationship or a toxic friendship, well, but what about if you're in a situation where you feel like it was a healthy relationship, but that person's just cut you off, or maybe they've passed away, or they've moved away? How do you let go then? Because that's different, isn't it?
Is that more like grief?
Well, yeah, that's...
Well, I would say at the end of any relationship, it's grief, whether they've died, whether the relationship's ended, whether you've lost your job. Part of that is all of these endings are a grief process. So I'm really glad you said that, because it is. We go through a process in the letting go, which, you know, there'll be anger, like all those things that are a natural part of grief. It's the dying, it's the death of the expectation, it's the death of the thing we thought we would always do, or the relationship we thought we'd always be in.
Yeah, because we kind of get to this place where you always expect those people to be there. I remember being quite young, and a friend of mine was killed in a car accident. He wasn't driving, he was in the back seat of it. And I remember seeing him the week before, and then thinking I'll see him again next week or whatever. And I got a phone call from a friend going, "Did you hear about Tom?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, he's been killed in a car accident. And I had real trouble believing that had actually happened. I really struggled to let go of the fact that that person wasn't here anymore. Probably a lot of it was shock, you know. I was reasonably young at the time, but coming to accept that you're never going to see that person again, you're never going to have a conversation with them, you never got to say goodbye, you know, all of these things, you maybe stuff you regret saying or not saying and doing, that is a different kind of letting go. And I think Ian's right, that does lead into that grieving process, doesn't it, which is different to sort of detachment.
Yeah.
Detachment from what's not good for you. And I think that's the balance here, isn't it? When we're talking about this subject, we need to be able to differentiate between these two things. What was good for me, and I'm grieving because it's suddenly been taken away from me, from this has been removed from my world, and I'm in shock about it, but actually it needed to be removed from my world. It needed to happen. Yeah, and sometimes, because you haven't been brave enough to make the decision, the universe will make the decision or do something for you to make that happen. And it is a process, and I think what you've got to do is learn to fall in love with yourself again, to love yourself more than what you've been trying to pour all of yourself into. Okay, I mean, it's a fascinating subject. So somebody's listening to this now, what's one thing they could start to do to start to shift their focus, to just move the dial? If they're like, I'm really stuck in this right now, what's one thing they could start to do, do you think?
Well, you need to understand, do the inner work, see if you can understand, well, what the lessons are that you learn. Accept the fact that you can't control the situation, and you need to let go. look for other opportunities. Obviously, that's in time. Once you're happy with yourself again, you know, that sense of, you know, knowing the direction that you were going in.
Yeah.
You know, be open to other opportunities. You know, replace it with other dreams and hopes, you know, other expectations maybe. But just be open. Just be open to a new path, a new direction, and try and see it as an opportunity for change, an opportunity to rebuild a better version of you, maybe a stronger version of you, which is just the version that was there, but just with these new lessons that you've learnt.
I had a client recently who their relationship had ended, but it was quite a toxic dynamic between the two of them. There was codependency going on. It wasn't healthy. But when the relationship suddenly ended, the brain went into fight or flight mode and wanted to rescue the situation and pull the person back in, even though they knew the person wasn't good for them. You know, like the abandonment wound kind of kicked in. And one of the things that they did when they were really struggling to come to, they knew in their mind it was the best thing that could happen to them, but the shock of it wasn't, you know, the brain was going to need the certainty back, was they sat down and they wrote down 5 things that the person had done that made them feel terrible. And when the brain was trying to convince them, run back, go back into the fire, it's not sadistic. It was a reminder of the reasoning behind why it had come to an end when the brain was so fiercely trying to go, you know, come back. So if it is one of these situations, just write down 4 or 5 things that have been said, situations that have happened that have made you feel absolutely awful, and just remind yourself of those in those moments of when you're trying to win something back that's not good for you.
You said something great there, which was we're fixers. You know, most of us are fixers. So coming to terms and letting go of the fact that we can't fix it, or we don't want to fix it, that's quite a big thing. Just saying enough.
I think sometimes if people do abandon you, dump you, leave you, maybe that's actually what needed to happen, because there's a possibility you might not have ever have done it.
Yeah.
Maybe you weren't strong enough and it's been imposed on you. You were never going to leave the job, so the decision was made for you. I'm always a great believer that the universe will bump you onto the right path if you're not on the path that you should be on. Sometimes it's not in the nicest of ways either. It can be pretty brutal at the time, but later on it will make a lot of sense to you. I mean, what would you say?
I would say gratitude, which I've already talked into, and just because even if you can only find a grain of sand, even so, like the smallest grain of gratitude, focus on that. And actually, we all have mobile phones nowadays. Get a joy list or a gratitude list, or call it your rainy day list. So those days when you're struggling, like you can look for all the things you've accomplished, for those things that bring you joy, the things you're grateful for, and just build on that. And you can just do that in your notes. I know all phones have that ability, because this is what will help you through it. So when we're struggling and coming through the process of trying to let go, we will have something to reflect on. So it's I love it, because it's kind of the opposite of what you said, because all situations will be great. So yes, make that list if it was something that you knew you should have gotten out of, and then start to work on yourself, just as Ian has said, so you can look for opportunities. And it starts with looking for those small golden nuggets, those beautiful things that are going well for you, no matter how small they are, and you build up that list. And it'll be amazing. Like if you can come up with like 3 different things every single day over the course of a year, I mean, you know, we're getting on to nearly 1,000 positive reinforcers, because we do have a negative bias, and we do tend to remember the things that were wrong or where we've been triggered. And it takes for every negative thing that's happened, and you know, and a relationship with whatever it is a big thing. It takes 3 to 5 positive reinforcements to help us get through it, and actually even really 11. So like if you have a list in your phone that you can go to, it's only going to serve you.
So like I said at the beginning of the episode, you know, the brain's like Teflon for positivity and Velcro for negativity. It's like, take a look at your Velcro and see what's stuck in it.
Yeah.
and start to unpick it. I would love to hear from some of our viewers as well about, are they on a journey of letting go and acceptance, sharing any insights that they have, or anything that they think that other people listening to this podcast would be of use. But it's a great thing to talk about. I think when we get to a certain age in life that we're at, with a bit of grey hair and all the rest of it, you've been in this place numerous times. But just wanted to remind people, if you're listening today or you're watching us on YouTube, please click the subscribe or follow button so you get notified when new content comes out. That enables us to keep putting new episodes out, and we would very much appreciate it. And that concludes this episode of Tickety Boo. Thank you very much for watching.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP, or if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.